Call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silent prayer for our servicemen and women throughout the world and for all those who have passed away in our community, especially Ann Hickey Lemoncelli, daughter of former Mayor Eugene Hickey and sister of attorney Gene Hickey, and Paul King, former Scranton firefighter for 29 years. We keep them and their families in our thoughts and prayers at this time. Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry. Mr. Donahue?
Here.
Attorney Dempsey?
Present.
Mr. Gahn?
Here.
Mr. Rogan?
Here. Please dispense with the reading of the minutes.
Third order, 3A, agenda for the City Planning Commission meeting held September 25, 2019. 3B, agenda for the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to be held October 9, 2019. 3C, correspondence sent to City Controller dated September 23, 2019, in reference to an audit of the city's vehicle fleet, gas card usage. 3D, response received from City Controller dated September 25, 2019, in reference to the city's vehicle fleet gas mileage audit. 3E, correspondence sent to Mayor Wayne E. Evans dated September 27, 2019, in reference to salary adjustments for temporary assignments.
Are there any comments on third order items? If not, received and filed. Do any council members have announcements? I have a couple.
I have one quick one. The City of Scranton is preparing their 5-year consolidated plan, annual action plan, and its analysis of impediments of fair housing choice. As part of the planning process, the city is conducting a survey to identify residents' needs in the community and ideas on what city residents would like to see funds used for. Please take a few minutes and complete the survey, which can be found at the top of the city's website, scrantonpa.gov.
I have two. Last week, the Licensing, Inspections, and Permits Department began taking credit card payments. This Friday, October 4th, will be the last day cash payments are accepted. Beginning Monday, October 7th, only credit cards, checks, and money orders will be accepted as form of payment. No cash will be accepted beyond this date. Next Monday, October 7th at 5:45 p.m., a public hearing will be held for item 5B on tonight's agenda. The legislation is to approve a substantial amendment to the 2015 and 16 action plans. In order for home funding to be spent on a project and avoid any future penalty imposed by HUD, the legislation will then be tabled for a 30-day comment period as required.
Pat, I have two brief announcements as well. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending. The first one is in regards to a purse bingo that will be held this Sunday to benefit Kathleen's Crusade. It's in memory of Kathleen Kavanaugh, a young woman who lost her life due to domestic violence. It's going to be down in Old Forge at the Eagle McClure Firehouse. Tickets are $20 ahead of time or $25 at the door. This is somewhat close to my heart. Kathleen and I were shirt-tail relatives / cousins. We shared the same aunt and uncle and the same cousin. I on the mother's side, her on the father's side. So the one other thing I like about this is any and all benefits from this stay local and will benefit our local Women's Resource Center. And to date, this wonderful charity has raised over $100,000 to support the Women's Resource Center. So that's number one. Number two is the Greenridge Fall Festival is going to be this Saturday, October 5th. It's from 10 to 4 at the Greenridge Corners in Scranton. It's actually a beautiful family event. The streets are blocked down. You can bring your family, bring your strollers, bring your kids. There's plenty of food. We have beautiful retailers there. There's going to be lots of activities and things for the children to do. Last year we had hay rides as well, so I would invite anybody and everybody who's looking for something to do this Saturday to please join us there, and it's going to be from 10 to 4. Thank you.
Fourth order, citizens' participation.
Our first speaker tonight is Faye Franis.
please. Faye Fernandez, Scranton. I'd like to start off tonight from the articles I've read in the paper. And Mr. Gahn, I'd like to sort of address your comments. I was really quite surprised. You know, it's very easy to criticize when you don't know all the facts. I'm speaking about Fire Chief DeSarno. There was it wasn't just Mayor Evans' opinion that he shouldn't be fired. It was the union solicitor, it was the city solicitor, and the law. So I really believe, Mr. Gahn, if you were the mayor, I absolutely think you'd do the same exact thing as Mayor Evans. And you know, this may sound silly, but it really isn't. I watch Judge Judy every day, and all these people come in front of her, and she says this. See this? She said, this is a contract. If you don't have a contract, nothing is going to happen. Nothing. So sit down, go away. In other words, the city had no policy in place whatsoever. So that's why they couldn't enforce it, and that would encourage lawsuits. So I see, and of all these people that wanted him fired, well, hang in there. Come January, he won't be there anyway. So hip hip for them. I just, you know, he lied and it's not right. But you can't fire someone for that. And there was no policy. So, and even Attorney Dempsey said it didn't meet the level of firing. And I trust her completely because I think she's very intelligent. So I just think that everybody that feels this way should rethink their thoughts and really think about the law and think about the right thing to do, because it's only going to be there for 3 more months. You want to have lawsuits that the taxpayers are going to pay for, add on to all the other lawsuits? I don't think so, because you'd never win it. So maybe you don't like Bill Corright, and I didn't like him at all, or his associates, but I don't think criticizing Mayor Evans is the right way to go, because he's doing a great job. He's trying. And it's very hard for him to get people to work for a couple months. For example, like the LIPS department in HR. I mean, how do you hire someone? Say, you want to work here for 3 more months or 5 more months? Nobody would take a job. So he's a hard job. And he's doing the best he can. So I hope you give him some credit for that. Now, just let me check my little magic notes. Well, that's about it for that. I just want to speak a couple seconds on this garbage can litigation you have tonight. I hope it passes. I don't know that much about it, but I'm guessing a little bit about it. If I'm wrong, someone could correct me later. That people will be made to get garbage cans for their garbage, which I think is wonderful. That means they have to have lids on them at all times, lids, so nothing can fall out. If the lid falls off, get another lid. And if they don't follow this, they should go around quality of life, inspectors, police. If they have bags out, give them a notice, fine them, do whatever you have to do. And the reason I say this is because now we can enforce the administrative code of the city saying, if you don't pay your garbage fee, the DPW men do not have to pick up your garbage. And now there won't be a health hazard because there won't be bags in the street that the animals could get at. They'll be inside the garbage cans with lids. No access to them unless you get a bear. So I think this is wonderful. This is a step in the right direction. And I give Attorney Dempsey much credit for taking this aggressive approach like she said she was going to. And I hope the mayor works with her. I believe he really wants to. He really wants to get this done. And I hope all of you guys really back this up and go ahead with this law that the city already has, but has never enforced. I hope this is a step in the right direction, because we're tired of paying for everybody else's garbage fee. It's not right. Like I said last week, there's 6 people on my block alone that don't pay their garbage fee. And you put a GPS in the DPW's trucks, and they could have a red line come up to an address or something. Somebody could do it in the IT department stating which address doesn't have their garbage fee paid, and that way they'll know. It's not that hard. It could be done. And I hope you work on it. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Joan Hodowanitz?
Joan Hodowanitz, Scranton resident and taxpayer. With regard to the Ethics Board, we're still waiting on a 5th member to be vetted and appointed, and I'm hoping that the resolution is read next Monday, because we got so much work to do. We can't keep waiting and waiting and waiting. I know the person's been identified. I don't know why the vetting's taking so long, but October 14th being a holiday, we can get the first resolution read on October 7th. We'll go ahead and try to get something in the paper and get our first public meeting scheduled, because we have a lot of work before we can do anything productive. With regard to the independent audit, Attorney Dempsey, I hope you realize that today is the day it was supposed to be finished and delivered. Do we have an audit?
I do realize that. We do not have an audit.
Do we have a date when it's going to be available?
We do not have a date either.
Oh, that's not very good. I would suggest, though, for all future audits, that the engagement letter be included in the third order as an item so that people can see what is in that engagement letter. I get tired of copy and paste letters and documents, okay? We need to make sure that we're getting our money for our audit, and getting the bang out of the buck, because there's a lot of stuff in the city that needs to be closely scrutinized, and we have just found that out more than ever this year. With regard to the gas card audit issue, I have to agree with Faye Franis on one thing. If there are no written policies, shame on the city. So one of the first priorities of this administration as it goes through the end of the year and the incoming administration, we need written policies. We need to make sure that city employees and officials know what they're accountable for, what they're responsible for. If they're issued a vehicle, a cell phone, a laptop, whatever, okay, property accountability should be spelled out. No more, there's no written policy. If they expend taxpayer funds with a gas card, a cell phone bill, a hotel bill, an airplane ticket, whatever, okay, it should be fully accountable. There should be documentation before they're given any reimbursement. When I was in the military, if you went TDY, you didn't get back a penny if you didn't show a hotel bill, meal receipts, the whole 9 yards, rental car receipt, everything. And it better not be outside of the duty, none of this vacation nonsense. Once you went on vacation, you were no longer TDY, you were on leave, and you weren't paid for that. So you need to sit down as an administration and decide what policies need to be written up, because I get the impression there aren't any. I did a right to know about a month or so ago, wanting to know what the city's hiring policy was. Nancy Craig came back to me and said, there is no hiring policy. And oh, by the way, we don't have a personnel director. So, why are there no policies? How can you expect the taxpayers' money to be cared for if you don't have written policies? And I don't want to hear next year, well, you know, we can't do anything about it. I'm tired of this good old boy network. You shook hands on the deal. Let's get it in writing so that everybody knows the right way to do things and what happens when you cross the line. Should be clear as, you know, the writing on the wall. Where do we stand on the status of City Hall renovations? Are we just kind of dead in the water on that issue? I'd be interested in that.
Anybody going to answer, or I guess I'll take over? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we're waiting for, or to see if we got the grant from the state.
Okay.
Yes.
But, all right. And also, when are we going to see the draft budget? October 15th, November 15th? When does that come up?
I saw an email from Mr. Bolzoni to the department heads asking that they send him all requisite information by, I believe it was October 14th or 15th, so I would assume it would be at some point after that, once he receives the data.
Okay.
And
I hope,
council has to receive it by November 15th.
okay, hopefully they'll include the capital budget with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice Schumacher.
Okay. Maurice Schumacher. I guess I'll start with the current controversy, which of course is the credit cards. And I'm wondering, I hope that you have surveyed all of the department heads and asked if they have the same kind of sweetheart deal that the head of the fire department had. Have you done that?
That would be the mayor that would handle that, not council.
I would think under the circumstances, you all could too, or have you requested him to at least make that survey? The problem I have with his current story is, why did the chief not say that the first time he came in, and why did he lie? I mean, how did that happen from the time he said he paid with his own funds for that money, for the gas, and then come back days or weeks later and say, oh, by the way, I have this. It doesn't pass the smell test for me. And I think you need to survey everybody and survey at least the department heads to see if they have the same sweetheart deal. Now, as to that, the current thing led me back, as I always say, we have a hot topic and then something else comes up and it replaces it, and then the other ones go away. And so I look back on two that I thought were somewhat important to me. One was when our Officer Wilding got killed. Council was hot on it. They were going to change the law, so you had to have the fencing if you had outside steps, so you couldn't go over, do what happened to to Officer Wilding. But I checked it, and there's no requirement for that. The other thing was the Airbnb. I went on Airbnb and I put in, I'd like to go to Scranton, Pennsylvania. Do you have any places? Oh, yeah, sure we do. Now, how you could go after one resident for so long and then not go on Airbnb and tell those people that it's against the rules? I just don't understand, and I don't understand how they come up and then they go away and nothing ever happens. Then moving on to the new section of Route 81 South. Did anybody check and see why East Mountain Road has 81 South on it? No?
We did send a request. We haven't gotten anything back yet, but
Okay.
I'll follow up again on this week.
And two things.
On that again this week.
Thank you. I was happy to see that that's going to be paved. However, maybe I was sort of busy and I didn't read that article. I just sort of scanned it, but I did not see PAWC in there. And that water company has done more than its share of tearing that road up. I mean, my little guy and I sat on the porch last year and we actually logged in, I don't remember now, 5 or 7 trucks on a regular basis, water trucks. Water's heavy. Tanker trucks every 20 minutes, all the way up to the fire department to make it was easier to make the turn, go down, get on 81, go dump it, come back, and repeat all day long, in addition to all the other heavy equipment. And again, my plea to have Seymour Avenue and East Mountain Road put a weight restriction on that unless there is a delivery within that local area. Any other road, unless, I don't know how the RFP was written, but it better be highway depth on on East Mountain Road if they do it, or it's going to get eaten up again the way the traffic is. I mean, you can't have tractor trailers going down East Mountain Road either. So I hope you'll look into that and make sure when it's done correctly. On tonight, quickly to the agenda. 5C, D, and E, and actually one in the final order. When I looked at the backup of those appointments, there was no resumes. I thought you required a resume or a letter of interest for those appointments, and I think that we, the public, deserve particularly, maybe the one tonight, with to see if people have any idea of what they're getting into. Do they, So,
I believe
I'll come
we
back with the
have
rest.
those. I know when I met with Mayor Evans, he had a stack thick on his desk of resumes from when he put it out to the public, but they should be included with our legislation as they were in the past.
Well, yeah, I mean, he made a plea. The other thing, just if I may have 50 more seconds.
No, your time is up.
Okay.
Bob
Vote on
Bolus?
something you may not.
Evening, Council. Bob Wallace, Scranton. I'm going to start off because of all that's been going on in this city. I want you to keep in mind the mayor was on council before he became the mayor, as well as council members. Why wasn't the question on gas and vehicle use raised back then? The past is the past, and asking Chief to go back to 14 is an absolute joke. All one would have to do is look at the past practices of the city over the last 20 years. We're going to go back 20 years, 15 years, 10 years. There's been a common practice. I heard Attorney Dempsey state that, there should be something memorialized in writing. Let me be very clear, and both you and Hamel are attorneys know that a verbal contract is just as binding as anything written. And I would refer you to Bolus, my case against United Penn Bank regarding oral and verbal contracts. And you'll see that that's a very binding. I took it all the way to the Supreme Court and won. If he was told he could use the vehicle by the past administration, then they're the ones held accountable. And he shouldn't be penalized, nor should anybody else, for past practices. You start a new practice today, and that's where you start from. To tell somebody to go back and account for what they did is an absurdity. In fact, it's a living joke, because everybody here is accountable, just as he is. I brought up in the past about GPSs in vehicles. Nobody wanted to listen. Mr. Donahue, you were on the school board over there. Look at the money it cost us over there. Nobody monitored fuel, nobody monitored vendors, nobody monitored this, nobody monitored that. Now we're going to go penalize one individual when it's been a common practice through this whole city, whether it's the school district or the city of Scranton. Come on, let's get realistic and move forward. The city's been demoralized enough already. And start penalizing a man who put his life on the line. I know what it's like. I've been a first responder for many years in troop. Okay? So to sit here and criticize was done, yeah, if it was wrong, it was wrong. But it was done with his superior's authority. Keep that in mind. It flows downhill, not uphill. So to sit here and keep criticizing him for whatever purpose it is, I think is an absolute joke. You're climbing over the pennies to get at the dollars. Go after Mulligan's money that he hung us for all the health insurance. If he can't pay it, turn him into the AG's office on their fraud department on insurance fraud. We're entitled to the money, but nobody's done nothing. But yet you want his money back for stupid gas bills. Look at Nayog Park. I came in here and I filed an injunction. I'm filing another injunction with the complaint to stop the stupidity that's going on in Nayog Park for $100,000 for 280 parking spaces. We should be getting at least $500,000 a year. It's supply and demand. But nobody's willing to sit here, take the bull by the horn, disband the authority, and start doing consolidation in the city where we have financial control. Fiscal responsibility is everybody's business here, and nobody's paying attention. You know, when I see this here, you let the parking garage go, millions of dollars. They were here today, and I questioned them after you gentlemen had left. Where's my 500 parking spaces that I don't have to pay for because we gave you almost $5 million to taxpayer dollars? Oh, well, you got to pay. The heck we do. That was an agreement with Mr. Basiliga. And when they took over his agreement, they took over that responsibility, and I want our 500 spaces. They belong to the people in the city of Scranton. This is the stuff that goes on. And I'm going to get a little deeper here. You know, the chief in the paper here said he was given permission. The employees of the city owned leased vehicles or gas. This is a policy that has been in place. It's nothing new. So let's get off the tangent on them. Mr. Gahan, in all due respect, you said, I wonder what it takes to get fired in this city when you work for this government, said Consul Bill Gahan. Hardworking residents follow the rules and can barely afford their taxes. Yet you people won't do a damn thing about NAIOG, where you could be getting $500,000 a year, free parking, and you guys are all talking about Chief DeSarno paying back some gas money when you're letting millions and millions of dollars get down the toilet that are affecting every taxpayer in this city, including what the school district did to us.
Thank you, Mr.
Please pay
Bowles.
attention to what the reality and the real facts are and judge accordingly, because you're all accountable, just as he is and everybody else in this city. Thank you.
Gene Reed?
Good evening, Council. I feel like I'm kind of at a boxing match. I got bells ringing. I got a lot of tension in here. Be careful with that bell, Lori. You know. I'm here today. I'm a Scranton taxpayer, and I'm here today as the president and head coach of the Irish Boxing Club. And we're celebrating our 30th anniversary. And the city has been kind enough to give us a place to stay the last 30 years. And we've done a lot of good for the community. Not everyone becomes a boxer. Some it's just a good outlet for youth, people to get in shape. You need a good, positive place to go, relieve stress. Just a good routine to have. And so we're going to be celebrating our 30 years there this October 19th. I believe you guys all have a paper there, and we're offering the city employees a $5 discount. And just like to invite y'all to come out. It's going to be a good event, hopefully, you know. And what was I going to say? This is harder than boxing here. This is different. I gotta give credit to all you guys. This is good. This is not my arena, but thank you for doing all you do on both sides here. Yeah, so it's going to be, what I wanted to say is the Weston Field guys down there, the Parks and Rec, they've done over the building. Like it's used to go in. I guess they used to have maybe plays there back in the old days. They have a stage there, and they have like a ticket booth, and they've kind of redone everything. So you come in now, you're going to go through the ticket booth. They're going to be the stage open, and we're hoping to have like 3 or 4 boxing shows a year there. And they said they like to have other stuff there, you know. But that's all. I'd like to thank you. And there is some openings on our card if you want to match up councilman and whoever else. You know, you got my number.
And Mr. Reed, I just want to say one thing, and I don't know, people should know you by now since you're in the paper around St. Patrick's Day with the Lions, with the DPW, but Mrs. Jeffries always talks about the signs. This is, I would think, one of the best employees that we have in the city of Scranton. Mr. Reed has been working for the DPW now for how many years?
27.
27 years. And the sign program that the previous administration had unveiled, Mr. Reed is at the forefront of that. I think it's only you and one other individual.
Yes.
And they do a ton of work. So I just want to thank you, since you're here in front of us, for all that you do and all that you have done for the last 27 years, and all the work that you do down at Weston Field with the boxing club. Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. Ron Ellman?
Hello, Council. Last week I took my little puppy to NAIOG. He's a French bulldog. He's little. So the first thing he did, of course, was go to the bathroom, and I cleaned it up. I had a garbage bag from the grocery store. You know there's no barrels for waste at NAIOG. I walked that place from end to end, from the street around the swimming pool. No waste paper barrels. There's no benches to sit on. There's no porta potties. No swimming pool anymore. That place has gone to pot. That's a shame. That's a shame what that place looks like, what's happening to it. It doesn't, you know, Mr. Durkin threw away $250,000 at a bunch of deadbeats downtown that don't pay their taxes right. He could have taken some of that money for the people of this city. One thing he could have done was is clean the bridges, have some people clean the bridges in the snow so they don't have to walk down the street because they're coming into town because they work here or go to spend money here or something. And who's paying for the lights for NAOG? I never saw a meter on those poles. I hope it's not the taxpayers because it's supposed to be closed at night. And last year I mentioned Brother Bill. You can get free gun locks. Nobody seems to know this. You can get a gun lock free. There's no excuse for guns being used in any kind of commission of a crime unless the owner didn't have a lock on it. There should be some kind of city, should have some kind of law for this. It simply would save a life now and then, like last week happened to the young girl in Wilkes-Barre. It was from what I understand, somebody took a gun, you know, that wasn't locked up and didn't have any business playing with it. You know, this month on 2 pieces of property that Keystone Resources and the university got, the taxpayers lost $1,100,000 worth of property taxes. This just never seems to stop. With you people don't do a thing to try to help something got to be done. Over a third of our property's gone to the colleges and universities and a bunch of phonies. Then you give $3 million last year to Lackawanna College. That's a financially sound institute. You know, Mr. Vogt has just raped the taxpayers of this city. He's dry, for crying out loud, and he's in the paper with like he's a big hero for us because he's leaving. It's good riddance as far as I'm concerned about him. You know, I was reading up on my son's computer today. The parking authority deal a few years ago, Abraham Hansen and his nephew got, I think it said $1,300,000, and Abraham Hansen's law firm got $200,000, they said, for 200 invoices. I'd like to see, he ought to have to present 200 invoices and the time element involved. This is impossible. I don't think he worked for $1 a piece. I think it's just another gigantic lie from these people against the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman.
Ms. Dempsey? Yes. Don't cave into those 3 next to you politically. They are destroying this city with
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. Your time's up.
not doing what they should be.
Gerard
Thank you.
Hetman?
Good evening, Council. Gerard Hetman from the Lackawanna County Department of Community Relations. With the schedule here for September, we're kind of right in the middle of the lull in terms of our events that we had over the summer and the early fall months, and then coming up here into winter time, fall and then winter. So we're going into some new events here coming up that we'll get to. But first, we had a number of good events already, including our Senior Health Fair and our Heroes Day Public Safety Fair, both earlier in September. Our tire recycling event was last week at the County Recycling Center, and also some municipal drop-off sites around the county. And of course, our trolley excursions, the themed excursions, always a big hit. Some more coming up later this year. So we thank everyone that came out to those events. We've had a good calendar so far, full of good programs in the community. We thank everyone for their support. Coming up, a few things. The Lackawanna County Center for Public Safety will host a winter Skywarn weather spotter course. It's Thursday, November 18th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the County Center for Public Safety, better known as the 911 Center, at 30 Valley View Drive in Jessup. This is a program where the National Weather Service, typically the folks come from the Binghamton office to do this, will train any citizen in reporting weather conditions in real time. We should note this is not a storm chaser program, just very simply a way for really anyone to make a contribution to public safety by simply reporting weather conditions in their area during a weather event to the National Weather Service. Believe it or not, that's a really big part of storm management and real-time reporting in terms of public safety from the National Weather Service. It's a big part of their programming during a severe weather event. So it's a good way for anyone, regardless of interest or scientific ability, to contribute to that mission if they would like. So, and we know some people do it and they move on. Some people get very involved in it. So there's always a need for new people to engage in Skywarn. So the course is available, and there's other ones throughout the year. Some of them have basic and advanced levels. Some of them gear more towards certain seasons. So for folks that really want to get involved, it's really the tip of the iceberg. Lots of good stuff to do with it if they would like. To register, they simply have to visit the web address here was cut.ly/GW90W05. So I know it's a mouthful, but there it has it. Or you can just go to the county website. We've got the flyer up there. Our social media also has that information. Also, the county budget process. I know we've talked a little bit about the city budget tonight, but as always, the county budget process is underway now. The commissioners have to present the budget by October 15th, which is a Tuesday this year. In keeping with past practice, I would imagine it has not been scheduled yet, but they normally do a budget release event where they present the budget as proposed to the public. Following that, they have to host a series of public budget meetings. Those meetings are normally held at municipal buildings around the county. Again, I don't have a date or a time for those also, but as soon as those are scheduled, we'll get them to your office, and we'll also report those to the public on our social media, our website. And then when the budget, again, is released, we do post a PDF version of it on the county website. In the past, we've also shared it with the libraries in the county library system, and we've also had it available at the commissioner's office. I would imagine that we'll do that again this year. And then, of course, the budget requires 2 readings at commissioners' meetings to adopt. It has to be adopted according to the Home Rule Charter by December 1st. So we'll keep you posted as that process goes on. We look forward to an interactive process. We encourage the public to read the budget, ask questions. That's definitely a good chance to get a good snapshot of how county government functions, exactly what's funded where, and it's just a good thing for citizens to be engaged in. We encourage participation in that and welcome it. So last but not least, we're at the very tail end here of National Preparedness Month. You may have saw an editorial in the Scranton Times over Labor Day weekend describing some of the good work done by the Lackawanna County Flood Risk Coalition. It came from Bernie McGurl of LRCA. So we encourage anyone to visit the coalition website at lackawannacounty.org/flood risk. And you'll find lots of good information there on preparing for the dangers of flooding, severe weather events, and lots of other good things. You'll hear more from us about that as we get closer to later this year and early next year. So that's all we have. Attorney Dempsey, I'll reach out after the meeting. I'll give you my card, and I'll be happy to introduce myself. I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council?
Good evening, Council. Dave Dobson, resident, taxpayer. Once again, I'd like to see some type of evidence that the $5 million plus grant to restore City Hall has been applied for with the state under the historical building grant. And hopefully I'll hear it soon, because I won't go away on that, ever. As long as I'm here, I will be bringing it up. You know, back when my father lived in Scranton, we had a company vehicle, and it had to be parked in front of the house. And the parking was sparse. It had to be shoveled. Then you come back and somebody's in front of it. There was a pretty old geezer lived next door, and I parked in front of his driveway. My girlfriend did anyway, and dropped me off. And all I did was turn and give her a little smooch on the lips and get out of the car. And he's out there screaming, he's calling the cops, and I didn't dare say anything to him because he had my father falsely arrested and drugged into court a few years before. So the point is that we started parking on the other side, and then I wound up in a fist fight with the neighborhood thug. Luckily I won because he had hurt a lot of people. And fortunately I didn't go too far because I was in a rage by that time. But anyway, the point being that with Mr. DeSarno, yeah, if you do have a company car, I would say maybe driving it to Atlantic City or New Jersey is the wrong thing to do. But if you have to make a quick trip to a grocery store and there's a radio in the car and you have to be constantly on call in case there's some type of emergency that he has to show up at, then, I mean, we could be a little liberal with that, hopefully. And that's it on that. And I would hope that we do have to have trash barrels, because I've been mentioning that for a couple of years. I have 2 or 3 trash barrels in the back, and the bags get deposited in them so the animals don't drag it all over. And skunks and what have you. I used to walk my dog in the courts at night, and I took a flashlight because I'd have to shine it because the skunks were after the trash, and if you walked up on them, if you flashed it, like waved the flashlight, they'd run the other way. So, you know, and all these people, one person a few blocks up used to take 4 or 5 bags of trash after the trash was removed for the week and just dump it in the back of their house, and it was all over the court. You know, the guy on the corner, it was, he used to complain about it constantly, and council members were up there and everything, and nothing ever changed. So I think it's time that we have trash barrels, and hopefully the DPW will be respectful with them, because a lot of times they, I've heard complaints about them being broken too. And I mentioned in a prior week about bicycling and stuff. Well, last week, right on the side of Wayne Evans Corporate Center there on Pittston Avenue, I waited till the light turned green and I went straight through on Hickory Street, and this young kid came up the sidewalk and went right across the street right in front of me. And that's my concern with bicycles, is hopefully with this walkability and bicycles and everything else, we'll get some kind of sanity there. I don't need people darting out in front of me constantly, and people have been killed down in Lackawanna Avenue and Wyoming Avenue, and I found out why. At a certain time of the day, the sun is directly in the driver's eye, making a left-hand turn or right-hand turn off of Wyoming Avenue onto Lackawanna. And finally, I'll print this up next week. In England and France, they can't understand why Americans are picking on vaping so much. They feel that it's like 20 times more lethal to smoke. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Is there anyone else?
Hello, Council. My name is Mary Jo Sheridan. I live at 1213 Schlager Street in Scranton, 18504. I will be brief. I just wanted to first thank you again for appointing me to the Ethics Board. and I am very eager, like Joan, to get started. And I just wanted to let you know that eventually I may want to get, or both of us may want to get yours and the mayor's thoughts on getting started, since we technically do have a quorum. If there are further delays in the appointment of our 5th member, but I realize there may be an appointment coming soon, so I don't want to push it at this moment, but eventually, I just don't want more time to pass without us getting to work. And I do believe, I did just want to briefly say that I do believe a priority should be education of our city employees and all public officials, including those of us who serve on boards and our elected officials. And I have been reading the code, getting familiar with it. It's very impressive. I have also been reading the Pennsylvania Public Official and Employees Ethics Act and comparing the two documents. I have also been reading about the recent story, the recent situation with someone using a city vehicle and a city gas card, I believe. And I do not want to opine on that situation. It's not my place. I don't have all the facts. However, I do think it's an excellent example of why we urgently need to get started, so that we can inform everyone about what our ethics code means for them. And also, I think it's important for us to be able to inform all city employees and public officials about the fact that this Pennsylvania Public Official and Employee Ethics Act has been in effect since January 1st, 1979. And I would just like to read briefly one section of Section 1101, if I can find it quickly. And it's the Section 1101.1 states the purpose of the Pennsylvania Ethics Act, and that declares that public office is a public trust, and that any effort to realize personal financial gain through public office other than compensation provided by law is a violation of that trust. And so I'd just like to emphasize that we have had a law on the books that prohibits deriving personal gain from your public office, and that this law does apply to public officials and public employees, and it explicitly applies to cities such as Scranton. So while I think our code in many ways raises the bar by providing more specific prohibitions and restrictions and standards, we have had something in place for a long time, and I think that, again, educating our public, including our employees and all of us who serve in any capacity on boards or as elected officials, as to everything that applies and as to what is appropriate and what is not is something that I just can't wait to get started on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to address council?
Fifth order, 5A motions.
Mr. Donahue, any motions or comments?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to start off with the whole fiasco regarding Chief DeSarno and his personal use of a city-issued gas card. I can't tell you the number of people I talked to over the weekend who are just completely outraged with this whole situation, and rightfully so. City resources should never be used for personal use, and I really don't give a damn if there's a written policy or not. It's just basic common sense. The most egregious fact of the whole matter is that when the chief was initially confronted about taking his city vehicle on vacation, he lied, and he told the mayor he paid for his own gas. Given the current circumstances, I do understand that the mayor is in a difficult situation, trying to keep city government as functional as possible for a short period of time. But if it were up to me, I would have fired him on the spot. The lie is worse than the crime, a lot of times. At the very least, some form of unpaid suspension is absolutely warranted in this situation. The whole situation highlights the lack of internal controls and oversight that is required to hold city employees accountable for how taxpayer money is spent. This council requested an audit to not only determine if this problem is more widespread, but also to get recommendations on what internal controls need to be put in place to prevent any sort of waste, fraud, or abuse moving forward. I also believe we need to reevaluate the need for certain employees to have gas cards at all. In the private sector, employees typically pay for fuel out of pocket and submit expense reimbursements with receipts, which would allow for more transparent oversight of where and when employees are spending taxpayer dollars. Regardless of the steps taken to reprimand Chief DeSarno, one thing is crystal clear. The current system has failed city residents. This is completely unacceptable and has gone on for far too long. Residents of this city deserve better from their government. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Employees within city government must always treat their positions as a public service, not as a self-service. Moving on another note, it was brought to my attention this afternoon that some streets on the paving list that appeared in the paper this morning may be undergoing work by utility companies in the near future. So I did ask Mrs. Reed if she would send correspondence to the BA and DPW to make sure that the paving list was shared with the utility companies to make sure they do not have any work planned for the streets on the list. Last week, I also received a complaint regarding the old Garcia's Market at 826 Pittston Avenue. The building has been condemned and on the demolition list for quite some time, and the neighbors reached out to see if there was any sort of timeline on when the building was going to be taken down. They have concerns about birds nesting in the building through open windows on the second floor, and the stench coming from the building is getting worse by the day. I know Mrs. Reed requested an update on that for me last week. I also received another complaint last week regarding streetlights on Lackawanna Avenue, and that a vast majority of them were out, and that the majority of the street was pitch black. So Ms. Reed, would you be able to send correspondence to the administration to have them look into that as well? Councilwoman Dempsey and myself attended the Hill neighborhood meeting last weekend. Chief Graziano was also at the meeting. He provided the group with some updates on police initiatives in the neighborhood, and also told neighbors he would look into their complaints regarding the lack of proper sight lines at intersections because of people parking too close to corners, especially on Vine and Olive Street. Neighbors also had concerns regarding a condemned property at 601, 603 Wheeler Avenue that still has people living in it. So Ms. Reed, would you be able to pass that information along to License and Inspection? And also at the corner of Olive Street and Wheeler on the even side of the street, there's a storm drain that is blocked so bad that weeds have begun growing out of the drain, and water is pooling at the corner every time it rains. If we could pass that complaint along to DPW. And also, I was told there's a dangerous pothole in the middle of the 1000 block of Myrtle Street, if we could include that too. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Dempsey, any motions or comments?
Yes, thank you. I have some commentary tonight, not any motions. I'm going to start with some comments on the gas card audit, just a few of them. I believe this is a very important audit. The 5 of us took it upon ourselves to look into this, and little did we know the timing would be so perfect. There's no doubt that as we dig deeper, we're going to find some problems. And what I was most concerned about was this getting lost in the shuffle. We started this process via a letter on, I think it was August 26th or 27th, and there was a little bit of back and forth, but it was a good month before the controller got back to us and said that her office was unable to do it due to, I guess, a lack of personnel, which is acceptable. At this point in time, I do want people to know that the matter is going to be put out for a request for proposals. We expect that that's going to be in the paper this Wednesday. I believe it's November 1st they're going to be opened. At that point in time, a member of council will be present. We want to make sure that everybody knows precisely what we're looking for here. I'm not going to go too much further into that, except to say that what had been provided to us thus far indicates that at least $30,000 a month, $30,000 is being spent every 2 months on gas. If we take that back over the last 3 or 5 years, that is an extensive sum of money. So sometimes I think people hear gas card and they're thinking smaller amounts of money. This could end up being a larger amount of money if we find any element of abuse. We're not on a witch hunt here, but what we all agreed is we are looking for further element of transparency in this government, and we want to make sure that everything is being done above the board, and as someone had made reference earlier, no more handshake agreements. So that is actually very important to me, where I know some people had looked at that and maybe minimalized it. I do not think that is something that should be minimalized at all. The second thing I would like to point out is in terms of policies, because that has been brought up numerous times this evening, whether there was a lack of a policy. While that may have been true at the time, only in terms of a vehicle policy, we still did have an older ethics policy in effect. But what I would like, my point is now, on August 9th, Mayor Evans and his administration did put into effect a new vehicle policy. So it is also important for me to show that, yes, while there was a problem, we have fixed it, and moving forward, we have an answer to that. The second thing I wanted to address is I'm dealing with Solicitor Iskra on a handbook as we speak. I've sent her over certain examples, and she is trying to put one together at this time. And the third thing is someone spoke about a hiring policy. I mentioned that I had done some research and found what I thought were 2 of the best ones around. I went ahead and I sent them over to Solicitor Iskra as well, so they are now in her hands for further handling and according to how the mayor would want to proceed. I did have a meeting today with the mayor, Solicitor Iskra, and Mr. Bolzoni, and while I'll get to the garbage issue at the end, which is, of course, you know, my main reason for meeting with them, I also did bring up the issue of a grant writer, because, again, I think that's very, very important. And while we do have one, I understand, who's very highly thought of and very well qualified and has done an excellent job obtaining grants for the city, my understanding is, and Mr. Donahue can maybe speak to this if there's anything further to add, in a shared services meeting with the Scranton School District, there's been additional talk of possibly getting an additional one that we can share with the school district. I will repeat my belief that these are employees that pay for themselves. There's enough grant efforts out there that if they write 3 or 4 or 5 a year, sometimes they can double, triple, or quadruple their salary. So I want to look further into that, and I don't want that to fall by the wayside. If anybody has been, and I think most of the people in the audience here do pay attention to our agenda, you'll see that in third order there are additional letters that we have added in. There was one from the mayor to us regarding salaries, and there was also our response back to him. The reason for that, again, is increased transparency in municipal government. We all feel very strongly, in light of what happened with the previous administration and the political corruption, that that can no longer occur, and we will no longer allow it to occur. We want you to know what's going on when we speak to the mayor. We want you to know what he's saying back to us. And I think those 2 letters are excellent examples. The one letter in particular for further administrations down the line, if they are to question what council's intent was at any given minute, that 2 or 3 page letter easily determined what our intent was. So I think it's important for that purpose as well. Mr. Donahue did say that we did spend some time up at the Hill Neighborhood Association. It was actually a lovely meeting. There was about 25 people there, very, very involved, lots of good questions. We were there for about an hour and 45 minutes. He is right as well that Chief Graziano attended that with us. I have to take this opportunity to commend him. With rare exception, he is at most of the neighborhood meetings I go to, and as you know, most of them are at night from 6 to 8 or 7 to 9. And I really just think he's a silent, unsung hero. He doesn't look for a lot of credit, but he does so much behind the scenes to make sure that that police department runs the right way, and I want to give him my commendations for that. I will repeat what I said previously. No matter what neighborhoods I go to, we all share the same problems: crime, blight, parking issues, the aesthetic of the neighborhood, et cetera. And Mr. Donahue again took down some addresses and whatnot, and we will follow through with the LIPS department to see if in fact those issues can be taken care of. I know in particular there was one building where they saw someone crawling out of the second window later at night. So we want to make sure that we take care of that. I also want to thank Mr. Fallon, the Director of Parks and Recreation. Last week or the week before, I had made a request. We had done a cleanup at Pretzel Park out in Greenridge for additional lighting and for the outlets to be fixed, and he was really on that. And when I checked one night and there happened to be a small problem with it, again, he immediately fixed that and made sure it was taken care of. So again, on behalf of myself and everybody else who requested that, I do want to say thank you. Just today, I received a fax from Principal Kara Ware at the St. Paul's School out in Greenridge. I spoke about this 2 weeks ago, and I got sidetracked a little bit due to illness. But her letter basically says that she is the newly installed administrator at St. Clair St. Paul's School, which has 2 campuses. One is at 2215 North Washington, and the other one is 1527 Penn. She notes that she has many students that walk to and from both campuses each day. Last week, our school crossing guard reported a very close call with regard to a student making his way across Greenridge Street. The area where the students cross at Penn Avenue and Greenridge Street has become hazardous as traffic moves very quickly along that stretch of road. Then she goes on to say, I myself have walked with the students to the corner, and it is quite apparent that we need repair work on the crosswalks there. I am also requesting signage that indicates school student crossing and would appreciate City Council's prompt assistance in this matter, as our young students' safety is a #1 priority. If any of you will recall, about 2 weeks ago, I spoke of that as well, that I had some concerns regarding crosswalks out that area. We do have St. Clair St. Paul's School as well as Robert Morris School. So, Lori, I think what I'll do, if it's acceptable, is I'll come to your office someday this week and we'll spend about 15 minutes or a half hour together, because attached to that letter, I also have 9 other areas where the students walk back and forth to school, and I went around and looked, and the crosswalks do need to be brightened, or they do need to be put in place so that we can avoid any dangerous issues. I do think Greenridge Street is a state road, so we might have to work with PennDOT on that as well. And to conclude, it would not be a council meeting if I did not talk about trash delinquencies. So when I met with Mayor Evans today, as I said before, Solicitor Eskra and Mr. Bolzoni were also there with us. We spent about an hour discussing this topic. What came out of that meeting, at least for today, I did discuss with him some of the ideas I have. I did discuss with him some of the ideas that were thrown around between myself and other members or residents who came to see me. What I will tell you as of right now, our next go-to job is within the next 10 business days, which is either this week, no, excuse me, it will either be next week or the following week. So I take that back, 15 business days. Myself, the mayor, Mr. Bolzoni, and Solicitor Eskra are going to get a meeting with representatives from Northeast Revenue Services. We're going to sit down with them. If anybody recalls, 2 to 3 weeks ago, Mr. Donahue made a motion that we all approved unanimously to terminate that contract, and I believe the term was as soon as possible. That has not yet been done. We all agree that there are moving parts and logistics and a contract in place. I was glad that I was invited to that meeting. I am happy to attend that meeting. I will have a voice at that meeting, so I will report back from that meeting to see what occurs with us and Northeast Revenue Services. And that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gahn. Any motions or comments?
Yes, thank you. Just on the line painting, I did have an opportunity, Attorney Dempsey, to speak to Mr. Gallagher, and apparently the painting machine was down for a period of time. So I don't know. We should check Mrs. Reed on when that's going to be up and running again. But I know that they were trying their best to get out there to those corners. So thank you. We did receive, or I received, a permit parking request for the 1800 block of Wayne Avenue over in North Scranton. So Mrs. Reed had sent the directions to those residents. I'd like, Mrs. Reed, if we could send correspondence or an email to the police chief about buildings 26 and 27 at Hilltop. received another call, as you're probably familiar with, from a gentleman who lives on the other side of those buildings. The people on that block cannot sleep because of the noise and the disruptions that it goes on until 3, 4 in the morning. Apparently, the housing authority or the security force up at Hilltop, they wrap things up at about 1 in the morning. But these things go on well after that. So if we could just notify Chief Graziano again that the issues continue to occur, I would appreciate that. Also, Mrs. Reed, another reoccurring issue. I ran into a woman this afternoon who lives on Leggett Street in North Scranton about rocks and debris. It's almost like a mudslide, if you could imagine that. When it rains and it storms, the rocks and debris flow out onto the street and settle right in front of her home and other homes on that block. She did inform me that the DPW director was out, and they did temporarily take care of the issue, but she just wanted to let him know that the problem is reoccurring. Last week, Mrs. Schumacher had requested the amount of money that is in the escrow accounts from the Scranton Sewer Authority, so we do have a copy of that, which I gave you before the meeting, so that takes care of that issue. The final thing I want to mention tonight is about the recent controversy with the fire chief. So let me just start by saying that, maybe I look at things black and white, but it's just a simple idea of the difference between right and wrong. I want to preface my comments tonight by saying that I have generally, so far since Mayor Evans has been appointed, agreed with almost all of the decisions made by him and his administration, and I think that he's doing a fine job so far. But I cannot, and I expressed my feelings to him this weekend, I cannot wrap my head around this decision. I am extremely disappointed, and I do not agree with Mayor Evans' handling of the revelation that the fire chief used a city vehicle and gas card on a trip to the Jersey Shore this past summer. Look, I understand that people make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And as Attorney Dempsey said, this certainly is not a witch hunt. I mean, let's remember the facts here, ladies and gentlemen. We did not go out looking for this issue. This was brought to our attention. If it wasn't for a person or someone giving a tip to the newspaper, I doubt that anyone would have stumbled upon this. As I said, people make mistakes, but the chief's actions, in my opinion, are so egregious that I do not believe they can be ignored. The decision by the mayor to allow Chief DeSarno to perform a self-audit of his gas charges is one of the most absurd things that I've ever seen in my time so far on council. Chief DeSarno says in a letter to the mayor, "Thank you for having the wisdom to discern that while I did use my card during the actual travel time in question, that filling my tank the next time the need arose, as mileage records can bear out, using my own funds, as I've also done in the past, was akin to paying for my own gas, and that there was not an attempt to deceive. Thank you for that," Mr. DeSarno says. I have an issue with this statement because there was an article in the Scranton Times, I believe in August, where the city business administrator said that the city does not keep or has not kept mileage records. So I don't know if Chief DeSarno is referring to his own records or the city's records, but if he's referring to the city's records, we were told that they don't keep them. The mayor and his administration are also claiming that the reason there were no disciplinary measures taken against Chief DeSarno for using a city vehicle and city gas card for his own personal use is because they were afraid of a lawsuit since there was no policy prohibiting this usage. This argument is extremely weak, and I would strongly disagree on 2 points. First of all, it states very clearly and very plainly in the city's code of ethics, under the section Use of City Property and Personnel, city employees or officials may not use any personnel, equipment, supplies, facilities, vehicles, or any other property owned and belonging to the city for their private purposes, use, enjoyment, or benefit. I don't know how much clearer you can be. My other question is, when did city-owned vehicles become personal vehicles for anyone? I don't remember ever hearing about this being a past practice. There's also major liability issues. The chief got into a fender bender in New Jersey. I don't know if there was anyone else in that vehicle. But suppose there was and the accident was worse. Who holds the liability there? It's insured by the city. My second reason why I think that the mayor and his administration's argument that they're afraid of a lawsuit is weak is that we shouldn't forget that Chief DeSarno is a political appointee and a member of the cabinet. He's an at-will employee. He's not covered by any union. And quite frankly, the mayor and administration should not be worried or be afraid about a lawsuit. They should be worried about the disappearance of trust that the taxpayers have in their public servants. What kind of message does this send? The fact that the chief was allowed to do this, allowed to use his car, use his city vehicle for his own personal use, and the only thing that happens is go do a self-audit, let us know how much you owe, and then you can pay us, reimburse us. What kind of message does it send to city employees who do the right thing? That the only ramification is that he has to do a self-audit. To me, it looks like business as usual. What's the most concerning to me, ladies and gentlemen, is that the chief is in a position of authority, as we all are. He's in a position of authority in which the public places their trust. The fact that he lied and told the mayor he didn't use his gas card for personal use and then admitted that he did weeks later after the Scranton Times obtained that information should be enough, or should have been enough. The fact that he even thought that using a city vehicle and gas card for his own personal use, racking up nearly 40,000 miles in 2.5 years, the fact that he thought that was okay should, in my opinion, disqualify him from holding a position of authority in any administration. And quite frankly, I still cannot understand how you can rack up nearly 40,000 miles on a vehicle. The city itself is only 26 square miles. So I don't know, besides going to the beach, where else he was going with the vehicle, but I think that's another thing that needs to be looked into. I also don't buy the chief's argument that he gave to the mayor and his administration that he had operated under the inferred agreement with the previous administration, that he had the freedom, and these are his words, to use both the vehicle and gas card as he saw fit as his own in essence. I asked this question, or posed this question to the news media: where is this agreement? Is it in writing? Did any other city employees have this agreement as well? As I mentioned to the newspaper, I am really sick and tired, and I have been over the last 5 years, of these handshake agreements or verbal agreements. We're not dealing with monopoly money. We're not dealing with money that grows off of trees. We're dealing with taxpayer money. And I have to be frank with all of you. I have talked to many people over the last few days. People are generally disgusted. Why? Because take an average Joe Smith, who lives in a neighborhood in Scranton. If he had done something like this or thought that this was okay, he would have been gone the second that his employer found out about it. I had a person email me with 35 years of experience in human resources who basically said the same thing. So, you know, I'm expressing frustration here on behalf of the people, and I think the majority of residents who have reached out to me, who are just disgusted that it seems like there's no repercussions for this sort of action. Another point I want to make here is that, and I think was lost in what some of the speakers said tonight, was that the fire chief makes nearly $90,000 a year. There's no reason at all for any kind of perk or any kind of inferred agreement. $90,000 a year, ladies and gentlemen, is more than most people make in 3 years in the city. And you need a vehicle for your own personal use on top of that? That is absolutely ridiculous. Every single day that we allow this type of behavior to go on, unchecked, undisciplined, the confidence in our government erodes. I want to thank Mayor Evans and his administration for taking steps to correct this issue. GPS, which I had floated the idea to them a few weeks ago, and they're taking that seriously, and I believe they're going to implement that. The new vehicle policy, which I think is great. But I strongly urge the mayor to reverse course here and hold Mr. DeSarno accountable for his actions. This whole saga is an embarrassment for every elected official, for every public employee, for the mayor, for everyone involved in the city, especially coming on the heels of the former mayor being charged with federal corruption and possibly going to jail. The other thing I want to mention is that, and other residents have mentioned this, and council people tonight, the lack of oversight on this issue is absolutely unacceptable. The fact that no one was auditing this and nobody was looking at these records, you have to remember, we're the legislators up here. There's a controller's office that is the financial watchdog. There are other avenues here where people should be looking at this type of stuff. Where this went haywire and where it went wrong, where everybody stopped looking at documents, is outrageous. And I'm glad that from now on they'll be looking a little bit closer. But again, this is the type of thing that leads down this road to people being allowed to abuse this type of thing and to go unchecked. The last thing I want to mention, which I'm very concerned about, Councilwoman Dempsey and I have been looking to find a contract between the city, a contract or a credit card agreement between the city and Sunoco, which is the city's gas provider. We did receive documentation today from the administration, a letter from 2016 from former city solicitor Jason Shrive, in which they were basically saying that Valero, who used to be the city's gas provider, was going out of business, so they wanted to use Sunoco as a sole source. Director Gallagher at the time said that they were willing to provide the same services that Valero did in the past, and they would also work with credit cards. We, to this point, cannot find any documentation of an agreement between the city and Sunoco. To me, that is extremely concerning. So we did ask Mrs. Reed to send another piece of correspondence asking them, to look again or to get something in writing. Because if you look further in this documentation, in 2014, it was bid out. The gas services were bid out. In 2016, as I mentioned, it went sole source and there was no bidding done. But there is documentation in here from Valero where they give the discounts on the gallons of gas and other documentation. Again, we have not received any from Sunoco yet, and that's concerning. So again, I would urge the mayor to reverse course on this, hold Mr. DeSarno accountable for his actions, and as I mentioned earlier, this, quite frankly, is an embarrassment. It should never be allowed to happen again. The fact that some people are coming up and defending the chief for using a vehicle because there was no policy is absolutely outrageous and ridiculous. You should have a policy, but people who are in positions of public trust should know better. They should know better. And this, as I said, is an outrage, and I don't agree with the way it was handled. Thank you.
Thank you. Picking up right on that, I did speak with Mayor Evans about this situation late last week. We had a lengthy discussion how he came to his decision. It is the mayor's decision. It's not council's decision. One thing he did mention, and I think it's been alluded to by some of my colleagues, is that the various attorneys that were involved in this process felt that this was the proper course of action. If my colleagues would agree, I would like to see the labor solicitor's opinion on why this came to this type of resolution. I believe that the new solicitor is Kevin Hayes, Attorney Hayes. If we could get what his take on it was, I think that would be helpful to provide some additional insight to council on the issue. Again, it is the mayor's call. People always want to see somebody get fired or put somebody's head on the chopping block. To fire somebody over a lapse of judgment, that's a judgment call to be made by the mayor. What type of agreements were made prior is anybody's guess. Unfortunately, nothing was put in writing. So again, it is the mayor's decision. I support his decision. But the bigger picture is this cannot continue to happen. There have to be controls that are put in place. The gas card audit, limiting who has gas cards, limiting who has city vehicles are all things that I think need to be addressed. There obviously are some city employees that do need to have a city vehicle 24/7. I believe a fire chief and a police chief are probably number 1 and number 2 on that list, as well as maybe a DPW director and some other individuals. But I do think we need to limit it. There has to be a limit on where to draw the line. I know that Mayor Evans is leading by example. He's not taking the mayor's vehicle. My 3-week stint as acting mayor, I did not take the mayor's vehicle. And we'll see who the next mayor, if they decide to take that vehicle or not and lead by example. But it is part of the compensation for the mayor, so it's up to the future mayors to decide. Something that is troubling to me regarding this gas audit is correspondence was sent to the controller's office. We did get some information back asking for an audit, but we did receive a letter back stating that the controller's office, a 3-year review will take a considerable amount of time. If you'd like a 3-year audit done immediately, I believe it'd be appropriate to hire an outside auditor. Based on a discussion with Mr. Bolzoni, he believes the same as well. I would just say that I strongly disagree with this. I think the reason why we have a controller's office is to handle these types of issues. Again, a certified audit, somebody mentioned it has to be done by a CPA. Obviously, council is looking for information to put controls in place so this doesn't happen again. So there are clear black and white rules on what can be done, what can't be done. In looking back over the last few years to see what has taken place, that who knows, maybe we'll be talking about something, another employee next week when we get more information. But the reason we have a controller's office is to handle these types of requests, not simply copying, pasting numbers on a monthly or quarterly report. So it is very disappointing that this is something that couldn't be handled internally. I'm not sure what the total cost is going to be of hiring an outside firm to do it. I do think it does need to be done, but I do think that this is something that should have been handled internally. And finally, I know the Ethics Commission was brought up by a couple speakers. I believe there is an appointment on deck pretty soon for that. But if there's not, I'm sure my colleagues would agree that we'd like to see it get moving as quickly as possible. I know a couple of you have grabbed this already, and we're here to help any way that we can. Thank you.
5B for introduction and ordinance amending file of the council number 44, 2014, and file of the council number 118, 2015, entitled, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and other appropriate officials of the city of Scranton to take all necessary actions to implement the consolidated submission for community planning and development programs to be funded under the Community Development Block Grant Program, Home Investment Partnership Program, and Emergency Solutions Grants Program for the period beginning January 1, 2015, and for the period beginning January 1, 2016, by amending the 2015 Action Plan and the 2016 Action Plan by utilizing $63,831.69 from the 2015 Action Plan and $63,071.21 from the 2016 Action Plan in order to provide a total of $126,902.90 under the Home Investment Partnership Program to build a 2-unit rental house for low-income families in the city of Scranton, or to acquire and rehab 2 vacant houses in the city of Scranton for low-income families by and through the Scranton-Lackawanna Resources Development Corporation, a subsidiary of the Scranton-Lackawanna Human Development Agency.
This time I'll entertain a motion that item 5B be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5C for introduction of resolution authorizing reappointment of Tara Mann Shankar, 840 Wheeler Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18510, as a member of the Human Relations Commission for an additional 4-year term effective September 12, 2019. Mr. Shankar's term expired on October 14, 2018, and was held over until September 12, 2019. His new term will expire on October 14, 2022.
This time I'll entertain a motion that item 5C be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5D for introduction of resolution authorizing reappointment of Paul J. Strunk, 3 Cross Drive, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18505, as a member of the Human Relations Commission for an additional 4-year term effective September 12, 2019. Mr. Strunk's term expired on September 16, 2018, and was held over until September 12, 2019. His new term will expire on September 16, 2022.
This time I'll entertain a motion that item 5D be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5E for introduction of resolution authorizing reappointment of Om Timsina, 809 Cedar Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18505, as a member of the Human Relations Commission for an additional 4-year term effective September 12, 2019. Mr. Timsina's term expired on September 16, 2018, and was held over until September 12, 2019. His new term will expire on September 16, 2022.
This time I'll entertain a motion that item 5E be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
6th order, 6A, no business at this time. 7th order, 7A, for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, file of the Council Number 71, 2019, repealing Section 1 of file of the Council Number 12, 2018, of the City of Scranton and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict therewith, and adopting the 2015 edition of the International Property Maintenance Code, regulating and governing the conditions and maintenance of all property, buildings, and structures by providing the standards for supplied utilities and facilities and other physical things and conditions essential to ensure that structures are safe, sanitary, and fit for occupation and use, the condemnation of buildings and structures unfit for human occupancy and use, and the demolition of such existing structures in the City of Scranton, providing for the issuance of permits and collection of fees therefore, and amending Section 4 of file of the Council Number 64 of 2014 to reduce the fee to file an appeal with the Housing Board of Appeals based upon the type of matter at issue, and to promote resolutions of appeals before proceeding to hearing.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7A.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Attorney Dempsey?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7A legally and lawfully adopted.
7B for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for adoption, file of the Council Number 72, 2019, amending file of the Council Number 64, 2014, an ordinance as amended entitled, an ordinance adopting the quality of life and violations ticket process in the City of Scranton, to be amended in Section 3 by deleting numbers 1 through 7, 20, 21, 25, 26, 28, and 29, to remove violations, and in Section 9 to reduce fines for certain violations, and in Section 10 to reduce the amount of citation fines for violations.
What is the recommendation of the chair for the Committee on Community Development?
As chairperson for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7B.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Attorney Dempsey?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7B legally and lawfully adopted.
7C for consideration by the Committee on Public Works for adoption, file of the Council Number 73, 2019, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to execute a deed of easement and right-of-way between the City of Scranton and Lace Building Affiliates LP, granting to Lace Affiliates LP the easement, right-of-way, and rights as are set forth below, with respect to the property which deed of easement and right-of-way shall be in the form as attached hereto as Exhibit A.
What is the recommendation of the chair for the Committee on Public Works?
As chairperson for the Committee on Public Works, I recommend final passage of item 7C.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Attorney Dempsey?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7C legally and lawfully adopted.
7D for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 162, 2019, appointment of Robert J. Morris, 648 Wales Street, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18508, as a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals for the City of Scranton. Mr. Morris will replace Robert J. Palmatessa, whose term expired on July 15, 2019. Mr. Morris's term will commence immediately and expire on July 14, 2024.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7D.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Attorney Dempsey?
Yes.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7D legally and lawfully adopted.
7E for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for adoption. Resolution number 163, 2019, ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton on behalf of the Human Services Alliance to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Commonwealth Financing Authority for a local share account grant pursuant to the PA Resource Development and Gaming Act in the amount of $350,000 for the project to be known as Human Services Alliance, a building and grounds improvement project located at 1509 Maple Street, 823 Jefferson Avenue, 841 Jefferson Avenue, in the corner of Myrtle and Madison Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials of the City of Scranton, PA, to accept the grant if successful and execute and enter into a local share account grant contract and commitment letter with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to accept and utilize the grant in the amount of $350,000 awarded by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for such project.
What is the recommendation of the chair for the Committee on Community Development?
As chairperson for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7E.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Donahue?
Yes.
Attorney Dempsey?
Abstain.
Mr. Gahn?
Yes.
Mr. Rogan?
Yes, I hereby declare item 7E legally and lawfully adopted. If there's no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Meeting adjourned.